With Pokemon Scarlet and Violet being less than a month away from us, there is a lot of interesting stuff to look at. We have lots of new gameplay from trailers and people that have been able to play the game a bit early, and it really gives us a more in-depth look on these games. We have a brand new way to battle, some more details on these 3 stories, terror raids, customization, crafting, and even more. Now, let's start with auto battles, which are definitely going to be a huge part of traveling in this world. And as auto as they might seem, there are still manual elements to them. You have to direct your Pokemon by pressing the R button towards items and other Pokemon, which is a good thing since they won't randomly knock out a shiny Pokemon. Now, you can still initiate a battle by bumping into a Pokemon, but now, similar to Legends, you're able to throw one of your Pokemon at a wild Pokemon and start a battle from there. Now, these wild battles are completely seamless, and you can still sneak up on Pokemon like in Legends Arceus, so they won't be able to attack on the first turn. Now, unfortunately, even though it does borrow these aspects from Pokemon Legends, you still need to battle these wild Pokemon in order to catch them, which I guess makes sense since your main goal won't be to fill up the Pokedex and instead the 3 stories. And unfortunately, the battles don't seem to be as refined. When we compare the two, the wild battle in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet takes twice as long to load. Again, the game footage is not final, but we'll see. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a way to take over an auto battle in the middle of it, so it would be nice to switch to controlling it if you're fighting something a bit tougher. Anyway, let's move over to Starfall Street where these auto battles continue, and it looks like since we're in more of an isolated spot that we'll only be able to use 3 Pokemon compared to 1. Now, there will be multiple Team Star bases, but for this one at least, it looks like we'll have to take down 30 Pokemon in order to battle the boss. And it does look like these battles will be challenging to some degree because at 9 Pokemon in, Palmy has fainted, Wiglet and Jigglypuff aren't doing too good, they're under half health despite being at least level 20. Though later we see Wiglet's health bar go higher, indicating that we can potentially use or find items to make our challenge a little bit easier. And by looking at the overhead map of this base, there are multiple entrances, which means that maybe there are different ways to take on this base. And finally, when we arrive at the boss, we'll have access to all 6 of our members. So by looking at all the fire-type Pokemon we've seen so far, it looks like each team and their respective boss will specialize in a specific type. So it looks like these evil team bases will sort of resemble gyms, but with a twist obviously. But it does look to be more than just hunting and taking down their bases since we have a screenshot of us getting challenged by a grunt. So we'll most likely see them out and about, meaning that Starfall Street could be more beyond just a base. Next we have Terastallizing, and when looking at it side by side with Dynamax, it seems like Pokemon has made less of a big deal about it. There aren't all these new forms, though I'd say it might be more useful and more interesting, considering that modifying your type will really change up a battle. Then we're introduced to wild Pokemon that Terastallize when you battle them, which seems to be this game's equivalent to Alpha Pokemon. Now, what's interesting is that normally our Terraform stays until the end of the battle, but in this case, when the Pokemon gets to low health, it completely loses its Terastallization. Maybe because there isn't a trainer to Terastallize it, or you might not be permitted to throw a Pokeball. But anyway, let's go over the Terra Raid battles. And instead of the storm in Dynamax where 4 Pokemon faint, the battle is over, it seems as if there's a timer, which really goes well with people being able to attack at the same time. So when your Pokemon does faint, the timer goes down, and you'll need to wait at least 5 seconds to rejoin. At a first glance, it's a bit hard to tell, but we do see Drifblim fainting off to the side, and the timer dropping at the same time. However, one confusing detail would be why the person with the Farigiraf decided to Terastallize, since Farigiraf is a normal and psychic type, so it's completely immune to Chansey's ghost moves, and switching to a ghost type would just put it at a huge risk, with Ghost being super effective against it, and if it's more likely to faint, the timer will go down. But in this case, the timer is already super low, meaning that the battle would most likely end. So what's the thought process here? We know that we're not able to Terastallize customize right from the beginning and we have to wait a few turns before doing it. The only thing I can assume is that Chansey is following a set pattern, so maybe it started by attacking the Farigiraf, then as it went down the line, the trainer's Pokemon terastallized, taking advantage of the time and that it would be a while for it to come back and attack it. Earlier, we do see it taking down Sableye and then taking down Drifblim afterwards, indicating the possibility of a pattern. But there are a lot of cuts in the trailer from, I'm assuming, the other trainers' perspectives, so we really just don't know yet. But overall, these raid battles are pretty fascinating, and it's so nice that everything is much faster than raid battles previously. And just for perspective on how quick these battles are, in one of the gameplay videos with Aralts, the Terra Raid battle goes by really quick. And obviously it's probably lower level, but still, it's impressive. Now, unlike Pokemon Sword and Shield, they haven't said anything about NPCs for these Terra Raids yet. So maybe this means that you have to battle them on your own, or maybe their move AI is still on par with Sword and Shield. Okay, that's enough with battles for now, so next let's go over how we can go about our adventure through the Paldea region. And we'll start with customization, which seems better, but worse at the same time. So we've known for a while that you can change your eye shape, your mouth shape, and when looking through the list, there are a ton of options to choose from. The list is huge enough, but looking at the progress bar through the entire menu, the page is even longer than that. Not to mention that when you're customizing your character at the start of the game, you can also customize your hair and face at the same time. Then it all leads up to this new profile picture mode, which seems like it will be the replacement to League cards from Sword and Shield. And when we compare the card with the ones in the battle trailer, the text and the layout is similar, so we would most likely be able to see these selfies of our characters right before challenging other players. It looks like we could even see them before Terra Raids too. This photo mode in general is definitely needed in Pokemon because it just makes the whole game a lot happier. And on top of all of this for customization, we can even change our picnic table and the phone case on our Rotom phone. Now with all of these exciting new things, there's unfortunately a downside to it. In Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it seems like clothing customization has taken a little bit of a back seat. Now, obviously, you will be able to change your clothing because we've seen trainers in the trailers with different outfits on. But unfortunately, in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet trailers, they haven't mentioned clothing customization yet. At least with other Pokemon game trailers, they mentioned customization if they had any in that game. All of this leads me to believe that the clothing customization will be pretty minimal. It will most likely be like the styles we've seen in Brilliant Diamond and Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. But anyway, let's continue with how our adventure will look like. Aside from the Path of Legends, which we'll get to in a sec, the stories look to take place at set locations. So for the gyms in the cities, and for Starfall Street, the bases with the auto battles. The open world mainly seems to be a distraction from your objective as you go between towns. And once we get our team organized and our Pokemon picked out, it'll pretty much be for battling trainers and wild Pokemon for experience, as well as collecting items that could help us later. Now, Path of Legends, on the other hand, we know almost nothing about, but by the looks of it, it could be a bit more open. From the gameplay we've seen so far, Klawf runs away after we defeat it, so this makes me think that we'll spend most of our time chasing around these huge titans. We even get a phone call from Arven, which kind of reminds me of the Crown Tundra, where Peony would call you throughout our adventure, so maybe the story could be along the lines of that. I'd say it has a lot of potential and could be the most interesting out of the other stories. Now, the last part to the story is the legendaries, and by the looks of it, we'll be able to get them near the beginning, and they'll probably be given to you by the school. But what happens afterwards? Koraidon and Miraidon have to be usable in the game. From what we've seen of Pokemon Camp, the trainer actually sends out 7 Pokemon, so I'm guessing one of those count as the legendary, but probably can't be used until later. But how would we go from riding them to battling with them? Well, first off, they don't seem to fit in the context of any of the 3 stories, and maybe they could be reserved for the post-game, or maybe just as a reward for completing all 3 of the stories. Alright, well that's it for the story for now, so let's move on to the graphics. Now overall, these Pokemon games look alright. The detail on the Pokemon and trainer outfits look fantastic. The general textures like ground, buildings, and trees look pretty good considering it's on Nintendo Switch, but unfortunately they seem to come at a cost of lag. So the Sunfloras in the gym mission, the windmill in the middle of Artisan, and the nurse's hands in the Pokemon Center. And this is pretty concerning considering the games are 3 weeks away, but when we compare the English trailer with the Japanese trailer, they are very different. First off, the Pokemon that were improperly shown in the English trailer are nowhere to be found, and the graphical issues are non-existent. The windmill and the Sunfloras move consistently, as well as Nurse Joy's hands are no longer murder weapons. So it might not be a problem after all, but who knows? And yeah, that's what we have to look forward to in Gen 9. From the new stories to the auto battles, this looks to be a very cool game, and I bet we haven't even scratched the surface. But that's it for now, thank you for watching.